Fox News Podcasts presents the Bret Baier Podcast with Fox News Chief Political Anchor Bret Baier.
On Tuesday, FBI Director Kash Patel appeared before the Senate Judiciary Committee for the first oversight hearing of his tenure, responding to questions on personnel changes under his leadership, the Epstein files, and the FBI's ongoing investigation into the assassination of Charlie Kirk, among other things.
How's the FBI working to find other potential accomplices, folks who may have known about the shooter's plans, folks who may have encouraged him? Any update on any of that?
So in terms of what we do for an interrogation perspective, we go and reach out to the family and community immediately. And we've conducted those investigations and interrogations with local law enforcement. And we're continuing to do that because those closest to the suspect are going to hopefully know the most about the suspect and his beliefs and his ideology.
Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Congress continues to work to avoid a government shutdown, and the Federal Reserve is meeting to discuss rate cuts. Lots to discuss this week. Let's bring in our panel. AEI resident fellow Mark Thiessen, Democratic strategist and host of The Richard Fowler Show, Richard Fowler, and Fox News senior White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich, who is traveling with the president for his second state visit to the UK. Jackie, first to you. The president on the ground has a series of events, including a big state dinner with King Charles.
Yeah, the pomp and circumstance is really the draw for the president. And to his credit, the Prime Minister Keir Starmer knew that that was a good invitation to bring with him when he had his meeting with President Trump and gave him this invitation. Might be enough to keep his job in good graces. But really, tomorrow is going to be the big night. It's the first time an elected world leader has had a second state visit. You'll see procession through the estate at Windsor, carriage drawn, military bands, sort of looking at the troops, review of the troops. It'll involve Charles and Queen Camilla, and also Prince William and Princess Kate, who is expected to have her own event with the First Lady. So that's really the thing that President Trump is here for. But Starmer's also on the back of that trying to get a better trade deal negotiated. They were really hoping that the steel tariffs, they could strike a deal to bring it down to zero. Some reporting that just came out within the last half hour or so suggests that that might not be possible. And so it's unclear what made that go off the rails. As we understand it, they were actively talking about it right up until the president took off. But it sounds like now that is going to fizzle out, and they're just hoping to lock in the 25% rate that they're currently paying compared to the 50% that the rest of the world, of course, has. But that's sort of a failure for Starmer, even if he did get a win in bringing President Trump here for a second state visit. So I think we'll get more answers on what exactly caused that to go sideways after the ceremonies conclude tomorrow and the business gets underway on Thursday.
Today, we also heard from the prosecuting attorney, the district attorney, who will bring charges in the state of Utah against Tyler Robinson, who is accused of killing Charlie Kirk. Mark, we learned some details there about, ideology as well as communication that he had with his roommate and boyfriend who was transitioning.
Yeah, this was an act of terror. It was an ideologically driven attack that was intended to send a political message to the country. We now know enough about that to make that assertion. And I think what you're seeing is that the conservatives around the country are not giving in to terror. They're speaking out more. I think you're going to see a flood of conservative speakers coming to speak on college campuses across the country this fall. We're not going to let the worst thing that could possibly happen in response to what happened to Charlie Kirk is for conservatives to there be less conservative speech on campus, not more. If the universities around the country were to respond by saying, well, we can't provide security, so we can't host these conservative speakers. This cost of security be damned. They have to double down on free speech and show that we're not going to let terrorism drive us off college campuses.
Richard, what do you think the fallout to all this is?
Look, I think there's, real fallout amongst, to Mark's point. I think you'll see louder conservative voices, but I do think this is a cause to pause for the country, right? I think there are a lot of left-leaning groups who are trying to figure out how to navigate this moment. And I think there's a lot of Americans who are saying, this country really does have we do have a political divide, but beyond that, we have a real problem with gun violence, right? Right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, there were two school shootings, one in Colorado and one at the Naval Academy. And so I think we as a nation have to sort of look in the mirror and say, is there something uniquely wrong with our society that this is where we've gotten to? And how do we change that? How do we reset that? So this is not our current state of being, which I think for a lot of Americans, they're very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, well, let me just correct. The Naval Academy was mistaken. They thought somebody was attacking. One guy shot the officer, and that was kind of a takedown on that front. Unfortunately, uh, not serious injury on that shooting. The other school shooting was in Colorado, and you're right about that, Mark. I guess I wonder. There are a number of conservatives that saying this is not the gun issue. This is about hate and talking about fascism and Hitler and Nazis.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is look, all of these shootings are terrible, but to lump them into one thing and say, oh, we have a gun problem in America is dodging the issue. We have a political violence issue, and it is not a political violence issue writ large. It is a political violence issue on the left. There was a YouTube YouGov poll that came out. It asked, is political violence ever acceptable? And 9 out of 10 conservatives said never. I think that's too low, quite frankly. I'd love it to be 100%. But among people who said they were very liberal, it was 56%. 25% said political violence could be acceptable, and another 20% were unsure. This is there's a problem when you have the president of the United States, the former president of the United States, referring to Trump supporters as garbage. When you have the vice president calling him a fascist, which is the exact word that was on the gun shell casing that was going to be used for Charlie. The Democrats have to confront, and the left has to confront the fact that there is a left-wing political violence problem in this country that's not going away.
Jackie, the president has been asked numerous times about this, back on the Fox and Friends couch, where he announced that a suspect was in custody, and since about trying to bring the country together. And he always seems to dismount with there's a lot of anger on the left, and he's been pretty pointed about that.
He has, and you also heard Susie Wiles in an interview, less than a week ago, just a few days after it happened, say that the administration was working on something even before Charlie Kirk's assassination that was, spurred as much by the Ukrainian woman who was killed on the train in, I believe it was South Carolina, Charleston, as any other incident that had preceded it, some kind of comprehensive plan to address violent crime. And now that has been sort of tied in with his discussion about the left having, this sort of violent rhetoric. There was a study that came out that was talking about where, a lot of this violence is being perpetrated, and whether it's on, blue sky in liberal circles or on Discord and conservative circles online. The common thread is that it's happening online. So I'll be curious to see what the administration puts together. And the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, said something along the lines of basically getting at anything that incites violence and making sure that that is prosecuted. In terms of where this investigation goes, I think that we heard sort of differing takes today from Kash Patel on Capitol Hill. Then we heard from the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanchard speaking to Bill Hemmer on the story this afternoon. Kash had said, the FBI director had said, there were more than 20 people that were investigating, that were in this Discord chat that we're looking into. And yes, there could be more people that we bring in. The Deputy Attorney General said, not going to get into numbers, couldn't tell you how many there are, won't say that anyone else is going to be arrested, and not sure if there's a federal case right now. So I think that if you're looking between the lines, there's a lot of scrutiny over the sort of desire to put out there, including on social media, what we know about this investigation, whether that is prudent or not. And watching that unfold, I think, is going to be fascinating over the next couple of days. And
Richard, there has been a little bit of walk back or cleanup on aisle 4 from the Attorney General, where she said in an interview that free speech and hate speech are different, and not only just from liberals or on the left. Some conservatives are saying she had to walk that back, and she did kind of say something that leads to violence eventually, because obviously speech is speech according to our laws.
That is indeed correct. Speech is speech, right? And I think this is the bright line that we all believe in as Americans. And I think the struggle here is that any instance that turns free speech into an act of violence is one act too many. And I think whether it exists on the left or it exists on the right, and when I think about the right, I'm thinking about the killing of the Minnesota Speaker of the House. I'm thinking about the attack on the Pennsylvania governor's house, as well as what happened to Charlie Kirk. All of these are horrifying incidents that speak to what seems to be a level of rhetoric in this country that has turned people from saying, I disagree with somebody on the other side, to that disagreement has now turned into action. And that action has turned into putting people's lives in danger, or even worse, causing people to lose their lives altogether.
Panel, we'll hold it right there.
Let me just turn for this overseas trip, Mark. There will be pressure on President Trump to do something about Russia. That is, Putin has exponentially increased his attacks since Alaska, since meeting with President Trump, since saying the next step would be sitting down with Zelensky one-on-one and then a trilateral meeting with President Trump. Since then, and since meeting with President Xi from China, the number of missile attacks and drone attacks have gone through the roof. So there will be pressure, I think, from European leaders while he's over there to say, what are we doing?
I agree. And look, I mean, President Putin met with Donald Trump in Alaska, and he and Trump handed him a letter from his wife saying, for the sake of the children, let's have peace. And he responded by bombing a kindergarten. That was a slap in the face to the first lady. It was a slap in the face to the president. And as you say, he's escalated his attacks. But he keeps saying good things, but then his actions don't correspond with his words. And so at some point, I think soon, the president has to take his words as the final word. I mean, his actions as the final word. And start implementing some pressure on him, both militarily and economically. The president is right that the Europeans are, it's a little bit ridiculous for the Europeans to be pressuring him to crack down on Russian oil sales when they're buying Russian oil. I mean, maybe what the president should do is say, you know what? I'm putting 100% tariff on anyone who buys Russian oil, including you. Let's see how long that lasts instead of waiting.
Well, I mean, essentially, that's what Senator Graham's bill does. Yeah. It puts the pinch on anybody who buys
exactly. Russian. And does it friend or foe? It doesn't matter. If you're buying Russian oil, you're going to get tariffed. So I think that would be the way to go forward. Because at some point, Putin is just going to look and say, Trump's not going to do anything. I don't think that's true. I think Donald Trump is one of the things that I admire about Donald Trump is whether you agree with him or disagree with him on a particular action, he tends to do what he says. And what he said was he was going to come down on Russia if they didn't agree to peace, both economically and in military support for Ukraine. So I'm expecting him to do what he said he does, because that's what I've seen him do so far in his presidency.
And Jackie also says he's going to talk to the Chinese president, Xi, on Friday and resolve the TikTok issue, he says, and talk trade, and says positive things have happened on meetings with Treasury Secretary Bessent and the Chinese negotiators in Spain.
Yeah, it sounds like we have sort of the contours of a deal that would give the U.S. roughly an 80% stake and the Chinese owning the rest. You'd have a board created that was dominated by Americans. You'd have a member designated by the U.S. government. And then part of the details that have started to emerge is that the users would have to shift over to a new app, which has sort of been built in a safer way for our data, and also, I guess, keeps the proprietary nature of the algorithm in Chinese hands. I'm not the best tech expert to describe what that looks like, but I can say anyone who is a current TikTok user with a large following is probably not going to like that so much. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and if it involves, in fact, moving over to some brand new app that you call TikTok 2 or something along those lines. But the president going into the UK meeting looking, most hopeful about that than about, the trade deals that we're getting sort of, negative views of from the UK reporting, at least for the sake of the British here, and those who would want to see improvements to things like this, whiskey and steel and aluminum, that sort. But to your point about Russia, I do think that a large piece of the conversation on Thursday is going to be about NATO. The president sort of teed that up and said, look, I'm ready to do the sanctions when you're ready to stop buying Russian oil. And I think that we can expect will be his line. But to your point, Brett, how long does that last? We've talked about this before. It makes you wonder whether the president believes that those sanctions are the last tool in his toolbox. And if he views them in that way, maybe his willingness to wait is greater than all of us think, because what's left after that is something he doesn't want to see, which would be military involvement. Of course, he's the only one who can speak to that, but I think that's going to be a big pressure point from the Europeans and from the NATO allies in the Thursday meeting, and we'll see where the president lands.
Yeah, I think it'll come definitely by Thursday since he's over there. Panel, thank you so much. Now for a bit of history. September 16th, 1620, the Mayflower departed Plymouth, England, carrying 102 passengers seeking religious freedom and economic opportunity. After 66 days at sea, passengers finally spotted land. While the planned landing area was along the coast of Virginia, navigational errors and adverse weather caused the vessel to land on the coast of Massachusetts instead, roughly 30 miles north of its planned location. Before disembarking, the 41 male passengers signed the Mayflower Compact, a self-governing document for the new Plymouth colony, by creating a civil body politic to create laws for the general good. That'll do it for this week. You can hear more of this series at foxnewspodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts. Make sure to leave a rating and a review. We want to hear from you. For Mark, Richard, and Jackie, I'm Brett Baer. We'll see you next time.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.